extinguish the fires that still exist in our state, but very soon moving to the full recovery mode. We're standing shoulder to shoulder with the communities right across this state who have been affected, in particular the Adelaide Hills and here on Kangaroo Island. The Prime Minister's 100% right. We've got to be doing everything we can to support these communities, particularly the things that people sitting in metropolitan areas or other parts of the states can be doing is booking holidays on Kangaroo Island or in the Adelaide Hills, buying their fantastic wine or produce. These are the things that are going to be able to keep the economies in these areas ticking over, people employed, and making sure that we don't add compounding issues to these communities that have been hit so hard since the 20th of December last year. So again, great thanks to the federal government. I particularly also like to, at this point, very much thank the ADF. They are integrating extraordinarily well with the other personnel here, with the CFS, the MFS, DEW, the State Emergency Service. They're doing a great job fitting in. I think they've been welcomed here on Kangaroo Island almost like heroes. This is a very large landmass, 4,500 square kilometres. It's a big area. There's no way the locals can do all of the work themselves, so we're very grateful to General Elwood and Brigadier Cantwell and all of the ADF personnel who have come on to Kangaroo Island at the moment. I'm going to take questions at this point, and then I think we're moving on to General Elwood. Are there any questions for me?
Premier, just quickly on tourism, we've seen so many booking cancellations from visitors around the world for months ahead. Is there a real risk this island's economy will just keel over?
Look, we've got to be very careful on Kangaroo Island. There are two major sectors here, ag and tourism. They've both been really kicked in the guts in recent days. That's why the state government is moving into recovery as quickly as possible. We'll be announcing things in the coming days which are really going to put a focus on making sure that we keep the economy moving in the right direction. 4,500 square kilometres, 2,500 square kilometres of pristine island, completely and utterly untouched. So if you want to do the people of Kangaroo Island a favour, book a holiday. Get over to this island, there's still plenty to see.
The mayor behind you is calling for cash assistance. Is that going to be coming to the state?
We've already put out, I think as of Monday morning, 1,600 emergency payments have been made, totalling almost $1 million. I think we've already sailed past the $1 million figure there. The feds have put their emergency money on the table. And of course today, the payments that we're talking about, in excess of $11 million to go to these people that are affected by bush fires, is 50-50 between the state and the federal government. And you've just heard it straight from the Prime Minister's mouth that they're going to be making sure that people that receive those will not be paying tax on those monies. So great announcement today from the Prime Minister. Thank you very much.
Premier, isn't it a case though that as generous as it might seem, and under the circumstances it probably is, but it's just a drop in the bucket. It's not going to get these people back on their feet. There is plenty more to come from all levels of government, whether it be local government, state government, federal government, and of course a lot of the NGOs. We're going to have to be wrapping our arms around the people of the Adelaide Hills and Kangaroo Island and other parts of the state as well for a very long period of time, but we're in it for the long haul. We're going to be doing everything we possibly can to get these economies back on track as quickly as possible.
Is one of the things you'll be considering subsidising the ferry trip across? I know lots of people want to come over and help out.
Yeah, look, can I just say, every single solitary thing is on the table at the moment. We've appointed our local recovery coordinator. Mike Williams is in place. He's been on the island since Monday morning. We're looking through all of the options. We're prioritising those, and when we can make announcements, we do. We're delighted today to be announcing this $11.5 million between the state and federal governments, and now it's tax-free as well. So a great announcement today, but there's plenty more support that's going to be required here in South Australia. Thank you.
Well, I might ask Brigadier Cantwell and General Elwood if you could step up and just provide an operational update, particularly as it pertains to South Australia. Thanks.
So as you know, you'll get a detailed operational update from General Bilton at 14:30 hours in Canberra. I'll talk about the broader operations, and then I'll get Brigadier Cantwell to talk about specific operations here. Look, firstly I would say that the connections between the emergency services and the ADF continue to go particularly well. Great communication, making sure that we are leaning in where the emergency services and indeed the community require us. You would have seen yesterday that we had Chules undertaking evacuation operations from Malakuta. We have Adelaide base off Eden, and it is preparing, if it hasn't already started, to disembark elements to go and assist inland. In terms of aircraft, you would note that we've had an increase in aircraft. The Singaporeans have kindly provided 2 Chinooks that should be serviceable or working, I should say, from tomorrow. The New Zealand Defence Force is providing helicopter support and also fixed wing support, and we've also bought additional helicopters down ourselves from Townsville, so that will have a significant and positive impact. In terms of our troops that you'll see out on the ground, we're moving more and more into isolated communities to make sure that we have boots on the ground to understand what the needs are of the community, so that we can either make sure we inform appropriate elements or indeed provide the support ourselves. And I think over the coming days that will pay dividends. I have directed that we will have 2 elements that will be capable of air mobile operations based out of New South Wales and also Victoria, to make sure that they can launch at very short notice to provide multidisciplinary teams that can provide support or make assessments and then provide that support as it's required. Everyone is moving out hard. You would have seen the numbers in terms of reservists have increased significantly. We've doubled our numbers certainly over the 1,000. I'm not sure what the exact figure is. I'm sure you'll get that figure from General Bilton at 14:30 hours. But I must say, having yesterday been to Eden and Merimbula, and having been here today, you can't help but be impressed with our emergency management services, our volunteers, and of course our ADF are doing us proud, as they always do. I'll now hand over to Brigadier Campbell, who might like to talk specifically about the operations here.
Yes, sir. So my role is to lead and coordinate the effort across South Australia, and indeed Tasmania if required, but right now the focus is clearly on Kangaroo Island. I've positioned forward here on Kangaroo Island for now a couple of days, a team of about 120 people. The immediate tasks that they are working with the state emergency authorities here on the island include such things as provision of water to the community, both for drinking and also for farming and livestock purposes. Also provision of engineering assets and sheer manpower to help deal with the pressing issue both within the farmers and also to get access along the roads of the dead livestock and wildlife that are tragically being killed also in these fires. Also bring a whole range of other capabilities, and we are leaning forward with the other state emergency service agencies across the space here to see where we can help. I've got a whole raft of people also behind me in this effort. I'm building up what will be about a 600-person group here on the island over the next 2 days. They'll be made up of both high readiness units from across the Australian Defence Force, but also immediately after that, so we can be here for the long run, the contingent of reservists behind them to sustain the ADF effort. I'm buoyed by the confidence and the freedom of action that the ADF leadership has imparted to me as the commander here to ensure that I can bring any resource that's required to aid the community and the emergency services in the job on the ground right here today.
Campbell, just quickly on the water unit, does that mean now that locals have enough water for non-essential use? They've been rationing all week.
Yes.
Can they splurge a little bit more now?
Well, we'll work with the authorities from SA Water. I'm not the person to give authorisations about water dispensation from their perspective, but I can assure you that the ADF has now provided sufficient quantities to meet the immediate demand that was expressed to us. Today we'll have a water filtration and purification unit established, which have had flown in by Air Force assets from Brisbane overnight and trucked onto the island as we speak. That's got a capacity of 250,000 litres of fresh drinking water available per 24 hours, as well as the 150,000 litres of water we've provided already. So we're working with SA Water to make sure that the community's got what they need.
Prime Minister, can we ask about the situation in Iraq?
Sure.
When you say you've spoken to the CDF and have authorised Does that include the withdrawal of Australian troops? And can you also confirm whether the Taji base has been attacked?
Well, we're receiving further updates at this point, and the precise location of where the strikes have been are still being verified. What I have been advised by the CDF directly is that all Australian personnel at Taji, but as well as the other locations that we have there, as well as our diplomatic personnel at this point, are safe. And we'll continue to get reports from our people, whether it's in Taji, Baghdad or otherwise, to ensure that we're kept updated on that. One of the obvious, what I'm talking about, and to protect and defend, he has those clear authorities. We will continue to assess the situation, and that's what I'll be returning to Canberra in the not too distant future to do with the CDF and ministers this afternoon, as well as revisit all of these issues again in the morning, and what further developments there have been. But at this stage, it is a matter of protecting and defending those Australians where they are, and working closely with our partners in the region.
Prime Minister, it's not unsurprising, is it, that after the assassination of the Iranian commander, and President Trump's appeared to be very pleased with himself over that this missile attack would come as no surprise, would it?
Well, the United States have taken the actions that they have to address what has been intelligence that they say that they had received, which was putting their interests at risk and under threat, and they have been very clear about that. I should also stress that the Australian government has said, following that attack, that the individual we're talking about here, as well as more broadly, there have been concerns about their operations in the region for some time. And so the United States has taken that action, and will work continually closely with them. It was a matter that I did discuss with the President yesterday when we spoke. Obviously, we also talked quite extensively about the bushfire situation here. And I note that there have been many calls of support. The Polish Prime Minister last night, the Japanese Prime Minister, the European Council President, the Prime Minister of Papua New Guinea. It was a long list of calls that were made last night. The President of Sri Lanka, and the support that Australians are receiving from around the world is just very heartwarming, and we thank them for that. And there's been lots of offers of very practical support, but as always, we will take up those offers where they can be practically integrated with our own effort. But we thank them nonetheless for the great offers.
So you have total faith in President Trump's judgment on this?
The Australian government is working closely in partnership with all of our partners within the region. I discussed this matter with President Macron the other day, as we will with all of our partners. But my focus right now is on Australia's interests. My focus is on those Australians who are in Baghdad and in Taji presently, and they are getting all the authority that they need to ensure that their position is put in the best possible place.
President Trump's
Are you not
Prime
going to
Minister.
say some of the things that Locals asked you for today, or told you that the community needed?
Well, number one was a rural financial counsellor, and between visiting them this morning and driving back here, the Premier has and I have already put that in motion. I've already touched on a number of them in terms of local tourism operators, just asking for some, at the very least, some patience when it comes to any cancelled accommodation or any work with local tourism operators, and I'd repeat that message. The other feedback is the longer term arrangements that will need to be in place. I mean, there's stock disposal issues here. I mean, the stock losses here are just at 100,000 for an area such as this, quite staggering. And the process of having those stock buried is very important from a health point of view, and the ADF are assisting with that tasking. But I've got to say, the other thing that we'll need to do, and is already in train, is the delivery of mental health support, not just into this community, but in bushfire affected communities all around the country. That has a very high priority. I touched on that when I announced the National Bushfire Recovery Agency a few days ago, and the Health Minister has been working up a package to that end. But there was appreciation for being here. There was appreciation for the men and women you see standing around you, whether they're from the emergency services or Defence Forces, reservists or otherwise. There's great appreciation for that presence here. I think that presence is providing much needed practical support, but I think much needed morale support as well.
I mean, so you didn't go very far into the fireground today, just saw the tip of the iceberg. You didn't see the most destroyed properties, you didn't see all those animal carcasses, destroyed forests. Will you be making plans to come back and see the military scale of what's happened here
Well,
with Iran?
today, and particularly given the events in Iraq, that was on the way here was going to constrain particularly how far on long I could stay, as I'm sure you'd understand. But with the Premier today, he's got a very big photo stream and was showing me during the drive out there this morning those particularly decimated areas. These are areas I visited many years ago as a private tourist here on Kangaroo Island, so I'm quite familiar with how spectacular the place is, and particularly down there towards Admiral's Arch and places like that. And I've seen the moonscape in those images that the Premier shared with me, so you can rest assured that I'm in no doubt about the level of devastation on that part of the island.
Prime Minister, given you've spoken about...
I've been in contact with the US this morning.
Given you've spoken about global financial support or other assistance...
As is the Minister for Defence, by the way.
Given Chinese interests here are substantial, Chinese interests throughout Australia, shouldn't the Chinese government be doing something to assist this?
Oh, look, I'm focused on what the Australian government is doing.
But
Can I just ask about the deployment of reservists? There's obviously some concern initially about how they would be integrated and deployed. Are you confident that everything is running smoothly with the reserve force?
I'm very pleased with the level of integration between the reservists and the full-time complement of the Defence Forces, and how they're integrating, particularly under local priorities and direction, whether it's here in South Australia or in New South Wales. We've been in regular contact with Commissioner Fitzsimmons in New South Wales, for example. In Victoria, it's going extremely well there. I was only down there a few days ago in East Gippsland, and I could see it for myself. I'm very appreciative also of the support that's coming out of Singapore with additional helicopters. There's more New Zealand support which is turning up. Those helicopters also turning up today, I understand, General, but also there's the engineers support coming out of New Zealand. And that is all working effectively under the local priorities and direction. I mean, when ADF, particularly reservists who are going into communities and setting up pop-ups together with Government Services Australia, that's being done in concert with local state police and others to ensure that there's a very close working relationship at the local level, but also at the state level. And indeed, today, obviously, I've been with the Premier and had quite a lengthy conversation with the Premier of New South Wales on the way here today about events there as well.
Prime Minister, 5 brigade unions from every state have joined together to call for federal into bushfires.
Yep.
They want to know what causes it,
Sure.
and what can be done to prevent future disasters. Is that
Yep.
something in government will support?
This is something that we're very open to, but as I said when this question was put to me the other day, I think this is something we have to work closely with the states on. There are state responsibilities here and state issues. There are federal responsibilities here and how they work together. That goes on everything from how arson laws work when you've got fires that go across state boundaries. It goes to the activation points for efforts like the ones we're seeing here. I mean, in this natural disaster with these fires, this is the first time ever we have seen the call out, to the best of our knowledge, of reservists to be available to be deployed here in response to a bushfire crisis which runs over many states. Now, that has been backed up within days by the establishment of the National Bushfire Recovery Agency and a commitment of $2 billion initially to that effort. And let me stress, by way of comparison, that $2 billion does not include the category A to C assistance that we've been talking about here today. And if you go back and look at the Brisbane floods and Cyclone Yasi of some years ago, when a levy had to be struck, that total bill was about $5.6 billion over 6 years. And category A to C and like assistance, which is exempted from our $2 billion, was about $5.25 billion. And so we're comparing there, this financial recovery support that the Commonwealth Government is providing is absolutely significant, above and beyond what we've seen in a very long time, if ever. And if more is needed, more will be done. What I'm also heartened by is the fact that the state governments are doing exactly the same thing. We both have different tasks. We can provide income support. We can provide support to state government infrastructure works. The state governments will be taking the lead on those infrastructure works. Our commitment also doesn't include the deployment of what you see around and about you here through our Defence Forces and other agencies. And so this has been one of, if not the biggest, responses by a federal government to a disaster of this nature we've seen in this country, and you can expect that to continue.
Last question.
Sorry?
You touched on arson laws, what you just said. Do you think that the current penalties across the states are sufficient, or would you support harsher penalties?
Well, look, I'm as disappointed by the disgusting behaviour of seeing arsonists active in a season like this as any other Australian. I mean, it just makes your skin crawl, frankly. And state governments have been taking that up, and they've been arresting. I know in my own community, and this was some months ago. I want to thank the locals there who alerted police to some behaviour that they'd seen for some people going into a bush area, and they were able to tip the local police off, and they were able to turn up and deal with that. And Australians have been doing that all around the country. We've got to keep our eyes open, because while we always see the best of Australians through events like this, we can also see some of the worst. And that includes arsonists, it includes those trying to scam others who have been caught up in this disaster, it includes looters. And what I will say is that's not Australia, and that is certainly not the overwhelming, comprehensive definition of Australia. What you see of the spirit of Australia is what I saw with those families I met with this morning, some of whom have lost their homes, some of whom have lost their properties, and have lost thousands and thousands of stock. But there they do, stand together, support each other, and commit to rebuild. And that's what we will build on. We will build on that spirit of Australians, which is exemplified by all those amazing Australians going out there and doing what they're doing each and every day. There's some more difficult weather coming up in front of us over the next few days here in South Australia, particularly over the next 2 days, I'm advised, and on the East Coast, particularly on Friday. And so I would just encourage everyone to follow those instructions, make sure you're in a place of safety, look after each other, and let's stay focused on the job we've got ahead and supporting each other to do just that job. Thank you very much for your attention. Thank you.
I'll be right with you.
Yeah, I'll grab.
I haven't heard my phone's gone dead, but I might just ask. Yeah, I think I'll do it.
Guys, just before you all go, huddle round.
Down the road, but yeah.
I'll take her. Yeah.
Welcome, Lou. Thanks very much. Good on you. All the best.
trying to sort it out.